Sech Avoda Zara, Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, is starting from 3 lines from the bottom of Nun Amud Beis. The Gemara goes back talking about the din of Avoda Zara. When are you going to be chayv for it? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Abba, Avitzkei Chom Sheif Neis B'Makel. Avitzkei Chom, that they serve it by hitting the stick in front of it and waving the stick in front of it. Shama Makel B'Fanei Chayiv. If he broke the stick because this he's going to be chayv, because this Avoda is similar to the Avoda of the Beis Hamikdash. That was similar to shechting a behema, which when you shecht a behema, you break the neck. Zorik makabel for now potter, but if he only threw a stick, which is not similar to Avoda Sakabanis, he's going to be potter. Amle Abayla Ravos, Abayla Rav, Maishna Shavar. What's the difference when he breaks the stick? Mishum have like Kain Zicha that you can compare it. It's similar to shechting. Zorik Nabli, when he throws a stick, have like Kain Zika, it's like spraying the blood on the mizbeach. So he should also be chayiv. After the Gemara Amalei, Rava said Zika. This Zika with a stick is not similar to the Zika Adam, because we need it. We need it. Beina Zika Mishtaberes. We need that it should splatter, it should spray, it should break into a whole bunch of little particles, like when you throw water on something, it sprays all over. But Mashenk in the stick, it stays whole. The lake here by the stick, it's not spraying. Rav Abayis, Rav Akasha, we learned in the Brisa, Sofas Law, if he smeared Tzoya on the Mizbeach, or Shenisach, Lefana Ovid, or he took number 1 in Ashisl and he sprayed it all over Shomei Maraglaim of number 1, he sprayed it onto the Mizbeach. Chayv, he's going to be Chayv, even though it's not the Derech of Avoda Zara in these actions, but since he's serving it with other actions, which is similar to Tzoya Meraglayim. So again, even though it's not the derech of Avoda Zara in these actions, but since these other actions that he used, the Tzoya and the Meraglayim, which was a zika, which was similar to the zika that was in the Beis Hamikdash, therefore he's going to be chayiv. It makes sense. A shisel of number 1. That you spray it, so it's mamish like the spraying of the dam. Ika zika mishtaberes. You have the zika that's splattering and spraying and being broken up into sprays. Let's tell you, which is a solid my zika mishtaberes zika. What kind of zika that is broken up into particles happens when you throw the tzaya? And the Gemara b'tzaya lacha, we're talking about that it's tzaya lacha, that it's liquidy number 2. Correct. Let us say that the words of Rav is according to the machlekes of Tanaim that we learned in the Brisa. It says shachan law. Somebody slaughtered Avoda Zara chag of a grasshopper. Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv. Rabbi Yehuda is mechayiv whether it's the derech of Avoda to serve the Avoda Zara this way or not. Chachamim say that he's part my lab. Should we not say that this is what they're arguing about? The one holds that you're chayiv for such a Avoda Kein Zicha that is similar to Zvicha, and here, even though it's not normal to shech the grasshopper, but since he shechted it, it's similar. We don't say it's chayiv on Avoda, which is Kein Zvicha. Only has to be like the Avoda, meaning it has to be mamish shaykh this Avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, and the shechting of a grasshopper is not shaykh to do it inside the Beis Hamikdash. There's no shechita for a grasshopper. That's why he's potter. And for the same reason, when he breaks the stick, we should say, hey, it has to be mamish pnim, and that's not. There was no such Avoda of breaking a stick in front of the Mizbeach. Everybody agrees that you're chayv for Avoda, which it's, even though it's the derech of Avoda is not that way, but when it's ke'ein zvicha, we don't say it's going to be chayv ke'ein, ela ke'ein pnim beinan. We need actually that should be mamish be able to be this Avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. So why by chagav did we say he's not going to be chayv? A chag of a grasshopper is different. The hill it's somebody devil it's a behema, because the neck of a grasshopper is similar to the neck of a behema, so therefore it's considered as like shchitas behema, like that the Avoda that they did in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore he's going to be chayv, even though it's not the derech of that Avoda to serve that Avoda zara this way. Amarav Nachman, Amarav Baravu, Amarav. Avitzki cham shoyv nice memakel. Avitzki cham that they serve with a stick. In Shabbat makel b'fana chayv. We said if he broke the stick in front of the Avoda zara, he's chayv for worshipping it. V'neseres, and the stick itself becomes asa because it's considered as an offering, a takrevis. And we learned before, takrevis is asa ma'ana, has a din like a mace. Zorak makel b'fana. But what if he threw the stick in front of it? Chayv is chayv for worshipping the Avoda zara by throwing it. But the stick is not considered as a takrevis, and it's mutar. The stick is mutar. Amalei Rabbi Rav Nachman Maishno. How is Shabbat different when he breaks the stick in front of Avoda zara that it becomes that it has a din as takrevis as an offering? The Haviyalei that's considered kain zvicha, similar to zvicha. Hare zorak by zorak nami Haviyalei kain zika. When he throws the stick also, it's similar to the Avoda of zika. It should have a din like takrevis, just like when you break this stick, it's similar to the Avoda in the Beis Hamikdash of shchita. So by throwing the stick, it should be similar to the Avoda of zika. Amalei, I'm not going to answer. In order that the zika should be kain Avoda of that what they use in the Beis Hamikdash is be'inon zrika mishtaberes. You need that it should splatter. It should be that whatever he throws, it should break up in a whole bunch of particles like by water. It sprays and it goes all over the place. But here, when he throws the stick, it stays fully intact and nothing splatters. Now that there's a need that by the throwing that it should break, avne beis makolis, so that it should be also avne beis makolis. What about the stones that they used on the Avoda zara makolis, where the way they served is by throwing stones on it? So why should the stones itself become aser? It's not a takrevis. We don't find that in the Beis Hamikdash. Nachman said back after the dikashule. I also had this kasha, and I asked the Rabbi Baravu. I asked the same Sharla Chibarav asked his father Rav, and he said, throwing a stone on the makulis nasik megadel avitzki cham. It's only like the reason why it's asmanon because he's like making the Avoda zara bigger, so it's stronger and bigger. That's what makes it awesome, but not because it has a din of takrevis. It has nothing to do with takrevis. It has to do with making the Avoda zara bigger. This makes sense according to Mandi Amma, who says that right when he makes it, it becomes usher. So the Av Makeles became immediately usher when he threw it because he made the Avoda zara, he made it bigger. But according to Mandi Amma, that says no, every stone in order to become usher has to be worshipped. Tishli, here he didn't worship it, he threw it. The stone itself that he threw was to worship the Avoda zara, but the stone itself wasn't that he threw, wasn't worshipped. So that should be mutar. Tishli should be mutar dolei palcha. That stone that he had thrown was not worshipped. It should be mutar. Amalei. So Nachman said that it's considered as it was worshipped. Because when you threw one and then you throw another one on that one, when you're throwing the last one on the ones that are there, it's considered as he's serving each and every stone. So each and every stone now became served, worshipped, and therefore they're asabana. He says, by throwing the stone on the stone that had been thrown before it, became considered as being worshipped to, and therefore that stone is that he had thrown prior to this last stone. Now he's throwing the last stone on the stone that's in the pile. All those stones on the pile are considered as being worshipped, and therefore the asvana. But the last stone, no, there's not be that he threw. Nobody threw a stone for that last stone, so why shouldn't the last stone be muta? It wasn't worshipped. Amalei. So Rav Nachman said the last stone is not going to be also the law. And if you know where that last stone is, Zil Shakli, go ahead and take that stone. Avashi says that the etzem throwing the stone makes it as if the stone is being worshipped and worshipping others, and therefore this the last stone that they had thrown. By throwing it, is worshipping the stone itself, and the stone is worshipping the others. Now we learned in the Mishnah. You might have asked from the following Mishnah on the words of Rav Gidol that only Avoda zara that's similar to Avodas Bepnim becomes also because of Takrevis Avoda zara. So we learned in the Mishnah Matzah B'Reish, if he found on top of the Makrelis is the stone that lies on the two stones, on top of it he found ksus, clothing, mayis or kalim, money or kalim. Harelam Utarim that mutter because it's not made for to beautify the idol. Hakila Anovim, clusters of grapes, branches of grapes, and reefs of grain, v'yein, some wine, ishmanim, oils or slatis, and flour. The cold hour creates by cutting and is the government anything that's used for sacrificing on their getchkes, us is asbana because it is for the idol. Says you want to be shleima. Yeinish Shmanamus losses. I understand wine, oil, and flour is asvana the ika came pnim because it's similar to the Avoda that was on the Mizbeach, that they poured the wine on the Mizbeach, they mixed the oil in the menachis as part of the akravas mincha on the Mizbeach, and the menachis itself were made out of flour. The ika came zika mishtaberes, and you have the zika that splatters, it breaks up in particles. Elapachile anovim. But when you're talking about clusters of grapes, and reefs of grain, it's not similar. It's not shaykh to say it's not that it's takev Avoda zara because it doesn't splatter. It's a whole cluster. It doesn't break up. Amalai, so Rabbi Akiva answered. I'm sorry. Zakti Gemara. You don't have similar to the zika that it breaks up in particles. The full clusters and reeds of grain is not shaykh. That he took apart each grape, so by breaking it off the branches, that's considered as zika, and therefore it has a thing like takrevis, like shrita that was inside the Beis Hamikdash. Breaking off the branch is like shachting the behemoth, similar that they break the neck of the behemoth. How do we know one who shachts a behemoth that has a mum to idols is patash? Not like it says somebody who shats to the deities, the getchkes, should be completely destroyed because the only person he should be being sacrificing kabbalah is not Hashem. So here you see it has to be similar to what should have been shachtat to Hashem, and he's shachtat to Avoda zara, which cannot have a mum. Everybody had asked the shayla, what mum are we talking about? If you're talking about cataract, but we know this behemoth with a mum is mutter even to a bnei nayach to be makavit la Hashem, and we were considered bnei nayach. So for sure, to the deities, to those that shech the behema should be chai. If they use it, the cataract as a mum, it should be considered as a regular kravav to the deity, which is chayif, because even for a bnei nayach, which we were considered, and we were allowed to be makav bamis, a cataract wasn't considered as a mum. So for a guy that's for serving idols, it shouldn't have a din as a mum. Avoda, we have to say we're talking about the balchai mechuseiva, talking about a mum that is missing a limb. Said missing a limb is aser for bnei nayach. Not like it says in the pasuk before the mabul, who we all consider as bnei nayach. Each one you should bring into the table from the words umikol achai, from any living thing. So Amar Torah, so you could dash, and now it says Hava Behimim Shechayim Kol Rasha Yevon Shalom. What does it mean with Kol Achai? That it has to have all its limbs, and if it's missing a limb, it shouldn't be brought in the table. Okay, so, and we know it was Golu Yadul Ifnei Hashem that after the Mabul that Noach would have to be Makar Behemis after the Mabul from the Behemis that he brought in the table. So, and the Eibishter insisted it shouldn't be missing a limb. So that's how we know missing a limb is not Roya for the Mizbeach and Roya for the Getchkes. I mean, it's Roya for the Getchkes, but if it's missing a limb, it's not Roya. We needed the words Mikol Achai to exclude the animal that has a hole in the brain or something that's stated that he's not going to live. Says the Gemara, Meliyah is zara nafka. No, Mikol Achai, we don't need a Mikol Achai. We learn out that has to procreate, and a treifa cannot procreate. So that's how we know a treifa is not included. That's only according to a mandama that a treifa cannot procreate, cannot have children. But according to mandama that a treifa could have children, how are you going to explain it? You can't say you're learning out from the words of Lachaya Zara. It says in the pasuk when it said bringing him to the table is itok. So the word itok, the kavanah is that it should be about chaim b'dei malach, similar to you, and just like Noach, itok is going on. Noach wasn't sick, so too the Baal Chai that he brings in the table cannot be a treifa. Maybe Noach was sick, so you can bring a raya from itok that it cannot be sick. And the Gemara Tamik Sibbei, but it says on Noach Tzadik Tamim. So it cannot be that he was sick. Perhaps it means his midas were complete, midas tevis, and he was an anav and an ani. I'm sorry, anav, and not that he's and not treifa. The Gemara Tzadik Sibbei. It says the Gemara. It says the word tzaddik to teach us that his good ways of Mela Tamim. That it says there. If tzaddik tells you that he has to be complete in his midas, so what do I need tamim? Says you want to do more tamim b'derachot. Maybe it means midas tevis. Tzaddik is to tell you that his ways are, his actions are righteous. That he doesn't do any sins, and tamim means that his midas are special, are complete. Says you want to learn matzah. You cannot say that. The Noach go for treifa haba, that Noach himself was treifa. These hakadai treifa haba, because if it's going to happen in your mind that Noach was a treifa, so the Amalei when the pasuk says the kabasa chayil, similar to you should bring him to the teva. So that means shleiman leila tzayil. It means that you shouldn't bring a animal that's complete. That can be from this that Eibishter said to bring in balichaim, which was similar to him, which means. If you say he's a teifa, it will mean dafka teifa. So you have to say he was complete. It means that he was not teifa. So hashda nafka meitah. So now that we learn out with you means similar to you that it cannot have any. It cannot be a teifa. L'chai zera. What do I need the extra words l'chai zera? That it has to be able to procreate. And if you want to eat it, if I would have had only the pasuk itach, I mean I would have thought that we need that. The animals should be healthy to be able to live. It should be together with its other min, meaning with the same min, but within the keva. But meaning it cannot be treifes, cannot be sick, it cannot die on the table. We need that there should be husband and wife together, but it doesn't have to procreate. Vafilu zaken, I would have said even if it's a old behemoth, vafilu saras, and even if a behemoth cannot. Have kids cannot procreate, but they're not treifa. They are allowed to be. They should be brought into the table. I wouldn't have been excluded them from being mocked of them. Kamashma comes the pasuk and says, "Lachai zera." Only one that can procreate. That's the ones that you bring into the teva. So the Gemara now explains the din by zvicha that's shy b'fnim lavid zara. That's which is not the derech to serve the idol with. Amar Rabbi Lazar the Sheikh Behemoth of Makayla Shul Chayiv. How do we know, even though it's the Derech of Makayla is not the Sheikh Behemoth, but he only to throw stones on it, and he Shas Behemoth, how do we know that he's chayiv if he did that. Shneim, like it says in the pasuk, like yizbichu oids simcheim laseidim. And so you see, you're not allowed to shech to any of the deities. And if it's not referring to the shechting, which is its normal way of serving it, because we don't need it for kedaka, we already know that if it's the normal way of serving it is by shechting it. It says already, how could you serve the Isa of serving the deities in its normal way? So this extra pasuk of what does it come to teach you? Obviously, now you utilize it for a case where he serves it not in the normal way of this idol being worshipped. It's come to tell you that you're not allowed to shecht and worship Avoda zara, which through shechita, even though it's not its normal way. We need to look at the Tanya, like we learned in the Braisa. On Nun Amid Beis, that what it says by the Isa of Akrovas Shchuti Chutz. It says Ad Kan Hu Medaber Bekachim Sheikdishon. There, it's talking about by Kachim that he designated to be Makif to Hashem on a bama which was outside the Oyel Moed. V'shas Isa Habamis at the time when you're not allowed to sacrifice on high places, on stones. After the Mishkan was put up, it became us to use bamis, and that's what he's come to tell, that it's v'yikrivim b'shas Isa Habamis, and this person was makiv a carbon in the time that there was a Isa of using high places for worship, for serving Hashem. Sheyan Shamor. That the Isa Bamas already says, if he didn't bring it to the Pesach of the Maya, it says v'nichas ha'isha b'karvamai. So we already learned the punishment. Azhara, but we know ein shnalam kein masinim. So with Azhara, not the warning of not doing so. From where do we know that every punishment has to have a Azhara? Where's the Azhara for it? And the Talmud Lema, it says in the pasuk, "Pen tala ilisecha." From the word "pen tala ilisecha" comes to tell you every there the pasuk ends off b'chol mak masher to tell you a warning about the high mummies in the time of the Isa mummies. That there's a warning not to be sacrificed to it. And like Rabbi Oven said, whoever it says one of these lashonos, Hishama or Pen or Baal, is a warning not to do so. And here it says Pen which is a warning not to do so. The Gemara brings the Hemshchot of Rice, and they come from this pasuk of Laman Asher Yaviyu, the Elech, and on. Included is V'lo Yizbechu, Umedaber V'katsh Sheikdishu B'shas Hefta Habamis. He's talking about that he designated a carbon to Hashem at the time that you're allowed to sacrifice on these high places, on these stones, high places. But by the time he came to be Makavit, the Isa of Abam is kicked in. And so he's come to tell you and that you're not allowed to sacrifice, even though it was designated before the Isa. So over there it says by Fedish that it's also, even though when he designated as a covenant, it was at a time that it was mutter. What is the words and the Hebshach of the Pasuk? Whoever shachts a carbon on the high place at the time when it was also the Torah considers it as he's serving means as if he's serving it, worshipping the Avoda zara with this carbon. That's a mitzvah say to bring the Zavach LaHashem, meaning to the Oyel Moed. And somebody who's Oyvan, that is mevatel on the mitzvah say, or mitzvah say not to be maked the bama, which is outside the Oyel Moed. Where do we know that it's also Tamalema? Well, somebody who shachs the bama at the time of the Isa Habamas, it says that you shouldn't shacht the Isa. This is a warning not to be makif outside of the Oyel Moed at the time of the Isa Habamas. And we compare it to Pnei Asad as if he's serving idols. I would have thought even in such a meaning when he designated the carbon, it was at a time that you were allowed to be makiv on bamis. Only when he actually was makiv it, there was an isa of bamis that kicked in. So how do we know that the chiva b'asei, the chiva loisasei is lahem? Only to one who was makdish at the time, who designated the carbon at the time, you were allowed to be makiv b'bama, and only later on, and he was makiv b'shasi sunan, and he was makiv at the time, but when the time came to actually be makiv, it became also to be makiv on bamis. Lo yacheres, but lahem. But there's no einish kodesh to them. So you see, if it was lechatchila designated when he designated the carbon, you were allowed to be makiv on bamis, and then the isa bamis kicked in, and it became aser. There's no so there, he's not going to be chayv kodesh. So now, from in the Braisa, we learned that the pasuk of Yizchoi is said in the Geyash Chuti Chutz Bibama, to tell you that even if he set aside the carbon at the time when it was mutter, and then he shachted and he actually was makavit on the bama if the isa kicked in, so that's what we need for that case, not for the warning of shchita l'avoda zara, which is not is there to serve the avoda zara that way, that you're going to be chayiv. It was for a different case, for a case where he designated this carbon. When he designated this carbon was mutter to be makam on a bama, and when he actually was makam, it was also. And the Gemara Amadova said, even on this has hadasha not to shech to the makolis, you can learn out from the same pasuk also, even though it's not its way of service, because kribe, when you say v'lo yizbechu, ukribe v'lo, when it says v'lo yizbechu, it goes also v'lo yizbechu that the v'lo goes on the oid also, and the oid means on another case of that you're not allowed to serve the worship idols, even though through shachna behema, even though it's not its way. That's what we learn out from the extra word oid. The oid goes on the oid. We learned in the Mishnah Avoda zara that was matzbereish that was found on the top stone. Ma'is k'susei kelin, money, clothing, or kelin. Areilam atanim, they are mutter because it's not for the beauty of the Avoda zara. Akilas anavim, but clusters of grapes. V'atarashal shibalim, and reeds of grain, which is like it's like a crown with grains. The yenes and wines, and oils, with and flour. And anything similar to that, which is karev al gabin mizbeach, asis asvana. It says in one pasuk, it says in one pasuk, and seeing the abomination and the dirt of Eitzvaven, wood, stone, kesef, gold, silver and gold, Asheriman, that was with them. So you see that all of them, the kavanah is not referring to the Avoda Zarah itself, only it's include Asher Imahem, meaning even the eights and the Evan, which were things that the Goyim sacrificed before the Avoda Zarah, so is all under the nickname of Shikutsayim, of the abomination, to tell you that anything that was sacrificed to Avoda Zarah is going to be Yasvana. And not Eitzvava. So it's a stira. Okay, so how do we make sense of it? So if you want to imam, dumya, and alayim. Ma'alayim, that the imam with them is like on them. Ma'alayim, just like ma'alayim. What do you wear on top of you? Davashalnai. So Davashalnai also only something that beautifies the thing by wearing it that's on top of them. So Davashalnai is asur, but Davashalnai is something that if you put it on top of them, which doesn't serve as a beauty for them, mutter is mutter. Af imam Davashalnai asur. So too imam Davashalnai is something of beauty is asur. Sheina shalnai mutter. But if it's not Avnai, it's going to be mutter. In fact, let's say the reverse. Aleim dumya the imam. Ma imam, just like imam, hainu komasha imam, even something, anything with them means even something that's not beautiful. Afaleim, so too on the Avoda Zarah, it doesn't have to be a davar shalnai. Even something that's not beautified should be asa. Says if you want to compare a mohem to tell you even aleim doesn't have to be a davar shalnai. In Kain, lo yoim aleim. Just don't say the word aleim. Just say the word imam, which means anything with them is awesome. Zog the mother varei mois davar shalnai. You know, mois is a davar shalnai. Is a beautiful. Zog the mother Rabbi Yanai. The Chacham said in Beis Hamikdash, Rabbi Yanai, it says bekis, that it's in a wallet, tied kosher way, and it's tied up and it's hanging on the makoilis on its neck, which is not for the beauty for the Avoda zara. So Taka the Baleyan put it there to hide it, Amanas to give money for the galachim there. So you see that the ma'is are mutter, but why is it mutter? Even though it should have a din like kesef, because they were tied in a wallet. It says Gemara ksus davar shalnai. But ksus clothing is a davar shalnai. Why do you say it's mutter? It's talking about the garment was folded up, so it cannot be used as a beauty. It says Gemara kli davar shalnai. A kli on top of the makolis is to beautify the makolis. Papa said the schifle mashkilta areisha. It's talking about that he put like a pail in which you put water on in the pail. That doesn't look like a crown on the head. Anything that was within the curtains will have dollars, but here we're going to call in the boundary in the inner part of where the Avoda zara was. Afilu, if there was mayim, even if it's just water and salt, which was not for beauty, asis asmano, because we say that he did it as a takrevis for the Avoda zara. And mayim melech was also used by the mizbeach, and therefore the asa, even if it's not, it's the way of serving it, worshiping it. And it says anything that's found outside the boundaries of the Avoda zara, davar shalnai asa. If it's something of beauty, then it's asa, like we learned before. But sheina shalnai. But if it's not something of beauty, even though it's something that you're making inside, but since it's outside the curtains, we don't consider it as a takrevis, that it was as a service for the idol. We this whole inner boundary, the closeness to the makelis, and outside the curtain doesn't apply by the makelis and the parade. Parade is where they defecated in front of it, because where they threw stones at it. Lamai, the Gabe Mab what was this then said for? If it was said that you had to dafilo pnim, even things that are inside the curtain, kichutztam is like outside the curtain with shari and its mutter. Hashta purity, if you could serve by defecating on it, and the makolis by throwing stones on it, ma'im melech, which is not made l'noy le'mekarmelei, you cannot worship it. This is more of a mechubedika aveda than defecating and throwing stones by using water and salt. Avoda, you have to say that this benegay to isa afilu, even it's chutz outside the curtains. It's considered as inside the curtains, and usher, it's going to be usher, because for sure it can be used as worshipping their getchkes. Stop there.